Suggestions, any questions you may have.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Sunday, February 8th. Your reader for the first hour will be Edwin J. Vieira, and for the second hour, your reader will be Ron Bickelman. But first, to look at the weather. Bitterly cold today with intervals of clouds and sun, a high of 7, and bitterly cold tonight. Extreme cold can be dangerous, and a low of -4. Cloudy tomorrow to start off the work week, getting up a bit higher with a high of 19 and a low of 13. Tuesday, a little icy mix in the morning, then a few showers, but not nearly as cold, with a high of 36 and a low of 27. Wednesday, we'll see it cloudy with some flurries and a high of 31 and a low of 20. Low clouds to finish out the week in Thursday and Friday. High of 36 on Tuesday with a low of 15, and on Friday a high of 25 with a low of 18. But it'll be mostly cloudy on Saturday with some chances of sun and a high of 29 the following Saturday with a low of 19. And now, here's our first story. Dems' campaign focus remains fixed squarely on health costs. President Trump's second term has presented an array of opportunities for political opponents, from immigration crackdowns and lingering inflation to attacks on independent institutions and friction with overseas allies. Many Democrats, however, are staying focused on health care, an issue that was once a political liability but has become foundational for the party in recent elections. They insist their strategy will help the party regain control of Congress in the November elections and fare better than chasing headlines about the latest outrages of the White House. Republicans last year cut about $1 trillion over a decade from Medicaid and declined to extend COVID-era subsidies that had lowered the cost of health plans under the Affordable Care Act. Democrats are filming campaign spots outside struggling hospitals, spotlighting Americans facing spiking insurance premiums, and sharing their own personal health care stories. Senator Jon Ossoff of Georgia, one of the Democrats' most endangered incumbents this year, is expected to highlight health care challenges at a rally scheduled for Saturday in suburban Atlanta. It's a banger of an issue for Democrats, said Brad Woodhouse, a longtime Democratic strategist and executive director of the advocacy group Protect Our Care. I think it will be part of every single campaign, up and down the ballot. Republicans defend their votes as reining in ballooning health spending and cracking down on what they call waste, fraud, and abuse. Trump this past week launched a website to help patients buy discounted prescription drugs called Trump RX. They're working every single day to make sure we bring affordability to the people we said we would, said Joe Grutters, chairman of the Republican National Committee. But the party, despite controlling both chambers of Congress, has been unable so far to pass comprehensive health legislation to offset Americans' health costs. Ron Bonjean, a Republican strategist, said the issues would remain his party's Achilles heel until its leaders draft realistic proposals that can be turned into law. Once a liability for the left. Healthcare was once seen as a political liability for the left. In 2010, Democrats lost their House majority after President Barack Obama's signature health policy, the Affordable Care Act, passed without a single Republican vote. In 2014, they gave up the Senate a year after his administration fumbled the rollout of healthcare.gov. Those tides turned when Trump touched the stove during his first term, Woodhouse said, by supporting unsuccessful efforts to repeal and replace the health overhaul known as Obamacare, potentially leaving millions of people uninsured and making it harder for those with pre-existing medical conditions to get coverage. Republicans in 2025 passed legislation to reduce spending on federal health programs and food assistance, largely by imposing work requirements on people receiving aid and by shifting certain costs onto the states. Republicans said that would stave off abuse of the Medicaid program, and they added a $50 billion investment in rural health to offset losses. Unrig Our Economy, a left-wing group, said it has funneled more than $12 million into ads criticizing Republicans on health care since the beginning of last year. Democrats saw another opportunity to win voter support last year when enhanced ACA tax credits were headed toward expiration, and they forced a government shutdown over the issue. The funding wasn't restored, but the party believes they gained political leverage going into this year's campaigns. Republicans own it now, said Eric Stern, a Democratic media strategist. You better believe Democrats are going to be talking about that. showcasing stories. Steph Feldman, a Democratic consultant who was aide to former President Joe Biden, said she's hearing from candidates that the voters care more about health affordability than just about anything else. A recent poll from the healthcare research nonprofit KFF, formerly Kaiser Family Foundation, backs that observation. It found that about 1/3 of U.S. adults are very worried about the cost of healthcare, compared with about 1/4 who feel the same way about the cost of groceries, housing, or utilities. For Iowa State Senator Zach Walz, who's running for the U.S. Senate this year, tapping into those concerns has meant visits to vulnerable hospitals and tours of pharmacies. For Rebecca Cook, a House candidate in Wisconsin, it has meant meetings with hospital leaders and telling personal stories, including about how her dad's expensive prostate cancer drugs cost almost, and the $200 jump in her own ACA premiums. In a recent campaign video, Ossoff said healthcare was, quote, a life or death question. He's the only Democratic senator seeking re-election this year in a state that Trump won in 2024. At his rally Saturday, one expected speaker is Teresa Acosta, who frequently campaigns for Democratic candidates. She said her ACA policy, which covers herself and 2 teenagers, including a son with type 1 diabetes, now costs $520 a month, 7 times more than before expanded subsidies went away. I think most people would agree that health care is a human right, Acosta said, and the Republicans seem hell-bent on weakening access to it. ACA plans are heavily relied upon in Georgia, one of the 10 states that did not expand Medicaid. As a result, advocates have warned that the expiration of the expanded subsidies could leave Georgia residents uninsured. Recent federal data shows about 14% fewer Georgians have signed up for plans in 2026 compared with last year, although those numbers aren't final yet. Republicans say they don't want to throw money at a, quote, broken system. Representatives Mike Collins and Buddy Carter, 2 of Ossoff's top Republican opponents, voted in January against a temporary ACA tax credit extension that passed the House but languished in the Senate. Both deride the ACA as the Unaffordable Care Act, a phrase used by Trump, and favor a narrower Republican alternative. Carter, who worked as a pharmacist, said an extension amounted to throwing more money at a broken system riddled with waste, fraud, and abuse without addressing the root cause of skyrocketing costs. Representative Derek Van Orden, the Wisconsin Republican fending off a challenge from Cook, was one of 17 Republicans who voted for the temporary extension. He said he did not support the subsidies but had to vote that way to protect his constituents. He noted Democrats set the expiration date in the first place, but Van Orden was also critical of his own party for allowing the tax credits to expire without another solution in place. For the last 15 years, when you said health care, they dive out the window and barrel roll into a bush and hide, Van Orden said. We're the party of good policy, and so we should be writing policy, and we need to embrace this. In election year, Hochul's path to a second term looks smooth. A year ago, storm clouds hovered over Governor Kathy Hochul's road to re-election. In deeply blue New York, a Siena University poll of voters in February showed Hochul with a lower favorability rating than President Donald Trump. More voters sampled in the poll disapproved of Hochul's performance than approved of it. She faced the possibility of 2 Democratic primary opponents in Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado and Representative Richie Torres of the Bronx. A moderate Republican challenger, Representative Mike Lawler, loomed in Rockland County, as did Representative Elise Stefanik, a MAGA Republican whose national profile was growing. On Friday, as state Democrats overwhelmingly backed Hochul for re-election at their nominating convention in Syracuse, the Buffalo-born governor's road to a second term seemed far smoother than a year ago. Hochul won 85% of the weighted vote from Democratic committee members. Her sole challenger, Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, received 14.7. Lawler and Torres never launched campaigns. Hochul's sole Republican opponent, Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman, is expected to receive his party's nomination at the GOP state convention in Garden City, part of Blakeman's county, which starts Monday. Blakeman became the sure soon-to-be GOP nominee only after Stefanik, a Republican from Saratoga County and one of the highest-ranking members of Congress, dropped out of the race 6 weeks after launching her run. In the most recent Siena poll last month, voters preferred Hochul over Blakeman 54 to 28%, and they preferred Hochul to Delgado 64 to 11%. Less than 5 months from a potential primary and 9 months from a general election, Hochul starts from a strong position on top of a 2-to-1 enrollment edge and a big advantage in money, Siena pollster Steve Greenberg told the Buffalo News on Saturday. That said, campaigns are marathons, not sprints, and we're in the early miles of this campaign. Stefanik, who hammered Hochul on a daily basis, calling her the nation's worst governor, had the support of New York Republican Chair Ed Cox and most of the Republican county leaders in the state. In western New York, all but one Republican state lawmaker endorsed Stefanik. The exception was Senator Patrick Gallivan, who had not made a decision. Stefanik, age 41, the mother of a young child, offered a younger perspective than Blakeman, who at 70 is 3 years younger than Hochul, age 67. Blakeman, however, offered a more moderate candidate. Blakeman is pro-choice on abortion rights. Stefanik alleged he was anti-gun rights. While moderate views could hurt Blakeman with more conservative GOP voters, they also could entice Democrats and independent voters to vote for him. The problem for Blakeman to win over those voters may be his position on immigration, an area that a year ago did not appear to be a major factor in the gubernatorial race. Blakeman is continuing to strongly support U.S. Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement, known as ICE, at a time when their tactics and officers under the Trump administration have become increasingly unpopular. The separate killings at the hands of ICE officers in Minneapolis of Renee Nicole Good on January 7th and Alex Preddy on January 24th have led to criticism from not only Democrats, Hochul called the killings murders, but Republicans as well. They have questioned the Trump administration's early and vehement support of ICE's handling of the incident and criticism cast at Good and Preddy. Blakeman, in a social media post one day after the Preddy shooting, suggested Hochul was to blame in the incident. Blakeman said, quote, "Lawlessness in Minnesota is the product of the incitement against the rule of law by Democrat elected officials, including Kathy Hochul." In a February 3rd post on X, he stood firm on his immigration stance. Nassau is not a sanctuary county, and New York shouldn't be one either. But under Kathy Hochul it is, Blakeman said. As governor, I will enforce the law because public safety depends on it. Open borders and sanctuary policies hurt law-abiding families and cost you millions in higher taxes. As your next governor, I'll put New Yorkers first every time. In December 2024, when a Siena College poll asked voters if New York should support or oppose the incoming Trump administration's efforts to deport migrants, 54% said New York should support it, while 35% said the state should oppose it, and another 11% were in the middle or undecided. Last month, the most recent Siena poll asked voters the same question. This time, 36% said the state should support those efforts, 47% said they should oppose it, and another 17% were in the middle or undecided. Meanwhile, Trump's popularity had dropped in New York according to the same poll. In February 2025, when the Siena poll asked voters if they had a favorable or unfavorable view of Trump, 41% had a favorable opinion, 2 points higher than Hochul's 39%. Trump's unfavorable percentage was 56%. Last month, his favorability dropped to 33%, and his unfavorability percentage grew to 63%. Hochul's favorable mark increased from 39 to 49. Her unfavorable percentage dropped from 47 to 40%, and while a year ago 44% of voters said they approved of Hochul's performance as governor and 48% said they disapproved, last month 54% said they approved and 41% said they disapproved. Blakeman, by contrast, appears largely unknown to many voters, according to the poll. His favorable rate was 18%, up 5 points from a December poll, and his unfavorable mark was 20%, but 62%, 8 points down from December, either didn't know or had no opinion. Blakeman has slammed Hochul as a radical liberal and criticized her support for New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani, a Democratic socialist, as well as Hochul's running mate, former New York City Speaker Adrienne Adams. Delgado, meanwhile, is staying in the race, with former Buffalo mayoral candidate and activist India Walton as his running mate. Since this time last year, Hochul has seen her favorability and job approval and re-elect numbers all improved by between net 15 and 17 points, Greenberg said. She wants to stay in the same trajectory going through 2026, while her opponents will look for ways to knock those numbers down. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time for our morning listeners is 9:14 a.m., and for our afternoon listeners, the time is 4:14 p.m. And now to a front page feature. City sees slow, steady rise in homelessness. Problem is worsening here, and solutions remain elusive. Jess Vaccaro is facing his fourth or fifth winter of being homeless in Buffalo. It's hard to count them all, he said. The years blend together. As temperatures drop and snow accumulates, his most difficult daily task is finding a place to sleep. In winter, he looks for shelter warm enough to survive the night, protected from hypothermia and from anyone who might want to do him harm. Sometimes that means sleeping beneath the overhang of a vacant former drugstore on the west side. Because you got a roof, we sleep under there, just in case it rains, Vaccaro said. I put out a tarp or a blanket and lay on that. Vaccaro said he'd been living with his grandfather until he was arrested and sent to jail. While he was incarcerated, his grandfather died. When Vaccaro was released, he no longer had a place to go. So I ended up here, he said, gesturing to the neighborhood around Niagara Street. Vaccaro's nightly search for a place to sleep is a personal struggle, but it's not an isolated one. Across Buffalo and Erie County, homelessness is rising, becoming more visible and more complicated as shelters strain at capacity, encampments reappear after authorities clear them out, and rising rents push people with lower fixed incomes onto the streets. What was once easier to overlook has become a public issue, touching neighborhoods from downtown to the suburbs, forcing city leaders, service providers, and residents to confront a tangled problem with no simple solutions. Advocates in Erie County say the local homeless population has been steadily growing and has become harder to stabilize. Last summer, the Homeless Alliance of Western New York estimated there were about 922 people experiencing homelessness countywide, most of them in Buffalo, an increase of roughly 10% from the year before. Counting people without stable housing is imprecise by nature, but service providers say the trend is real. High rents, evictions, and a shortage of affordable units have pushed more people into homelessness, while mental illness, substance use, domestic violence, and job loss often make it harder for people to regain housing once they fall out of it. What we're seeing isn't a sudden spike, but a slow, steady rise, said Kexon Ma, executive director of the Homeless Alliance of Western New York. Even when people have income or a housing voucher, finding a landlord willing to rent to them has become increasingly difficult. Shelters are frequently, or near capacity, and emergency placements in motels or hotels are not always available or practical. As a result, Ma said more people are left to improvise. That could mean sleeping outdoors, cycling through temporary arrangements, or drifting between encampments, even as winter weather becomes more severe and more dangerous. But it's impossible to avoid. The rise in homelessness locally mirrors a broader national trend. About 770,000 people in the United States experienced homelessness on a single night in January 2024, according to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's annual point-in-time count. It's the highest number on record, and an increase of roughly 18% from the year before. HUD officials attributed the growth to rising housing costs, inflation, and a shortage of affordable rental units nationwide. How that trend is playing out in Buffalo is visible to anyone who looks at it. Homelessness is no longer confined to hidden places. Encampments have taken hold under bridges, along major corridors, and in public spaces. When they appear, they are eventually cleared out, and then reappear at the same location or somewhere else. Near Lower Niagara Street, just past the Peace Bridge, makeshift camps have formed beneath overpasses and behind fencing and shrubbery, visible to motorists and visitors entering the city. Mattresses, tarps, furniture, and shopping carts full of belongings have become familiar sights. City crews clear the sites, but mattresses and personal items often return within weeks, authorities said. Similar patterns have emerged downtown, including at Reading Park outside the Buffalo and Erie County Central Library. Police periodically remove encampments there, only to see people come back drawn by proximity to services, foot traffic, and relative safety. For some residents and business owners, the growing visibility has become a flashpoint. The area is very important for our community and very important for the city of Buffalo because it's the first impression of our city, said Casimiro Rodriguez, president of the Hispanic Heritage Council of Western New York. The issue extends beyond the city's core and into the suburbs as well. In late August, Orchard Park police, responding to reports of a loud explosion, discovered multiple homeless camps on vacant land, complete with tents and fire pits. And farther still, from the urban core of Buffalo, Jamestown off in Siles, officials declared a state of emergency in 2024 as encampments multiplied rapidly, creating what city leaders described as serious public health and safety concerns. Downtown business leaders say the strain is increasingly visible. Some businesses have shut off outdoor electrical outlets to prevent people from charging phones and other devices, and public fountains are used for bathing. Public spaces can double also as places for people to sleep. It isn't a city problem, it's a county problem, said Stephen Carmina, CEO of Carmina Wood Design and a chairman of the board of directors of Buffalo Place. It's a problem for everyone. Law enforcement officials say their authority to effect any sort of lasting change is limited. People have a right to be in public spaces if they're not committing a crime, said Buffalo Police B District Chief Tommy Champion. If they're just in a park, we can't tell them to leave. And now on to world news. In Iran, a woman's bravery is replaced by fear for her life. As tear gas canisters landed among protesters filling the wide boulevard, the 37-year-old beautician and her friends ran for cover. They sheltered among trees concealed in darkness, pierced only by the glow of streetlights, and small fires behind them in the western Iranian city of Karaj. Then, gunfire rang out, audible in the video she was taking on her phone. "Don't be afraid," she screamed repeatedly, her voice breaking. The crowd joined at the top of their lungs. "Don't be afraid, we are all together." "Are they using live bullets?" she cried out. "Shameless, shameless." Others joined in the chant, along with the cries of "Death to the dictator." It was a moment of collective boldness on January 8th, the night hundreds of thousands of Iranians across the country took to the streets against the cleric-led theocracy that has ruled for nearly 50 years. But after the bloodshed of that night, the beautician, like countless others, has retreated into terrified isolation. "A blanket of fear has settled over Iran," she said, "and a sense of grief and quiet rage has taken over. When you look at people in the street, it feels like you are seeing walking corpses, people with no hope left to continue living," she said in a text message in late January. Her videos and messages provide a raw account of the exuberance that protesters felt taking to the streets last month, as the shock that has paralyzed many after the bloodiest crackdown ever inflicted by the Islamic Republic. Monitoring groups say at least 6,854 people were killed, mostly on January 8th and 9th, but they say that the full number could actually be triple that. The clampdown since has been unprecedented. A month-long internet blackout has hidden the full extent of what happened, even as more than 50,000 people have been reportedly detained. The Associated Press received more than a dozen videos as well as a text message the beautician sent to a relative in Los Angeles during sporadic openings in the internet shutdown. The beautician gave permission for the material to be shared. The AP is withholding her name and her relative for their security. The AP verified the location and authenticity of her videos, which correspond with known features of the area around Sahmendi Park in Karaj. The AP could not verify all details on her account, but it broadly conforms with accounts from other protesters documented by the AP and human rights groups. Taking to the streets. The beautician struggled in Iran's economy, crippled by decades of corruption and mismanagement, and international sanctions. With jobs hard to find, she chose to work for herself as a nail technician, believing she could make a better living, said the relative, who has long been close to her and was in frequent contact even before the protests. She had little faith in Iranian politicians claiming to be moderates and reformers, the relative said, but she joined protests. The power of a popular movement fueled her sense that change in Iran was possible. She participated in the 2022 protests ignited by the death of Mahsa Amini, who died after being arrested for not wearing a headscarf to the liking of authorities, but she was disillusioned by the violence that followed. Over 500 were believed killed, and over 22,000 were detained. Her desire changed from saving her country to saving herself, the relative said. Her family looked for opportunities for her to leave Iran, but they never materialized. When protests triggered by the plunging value of Iran's currency began in late December, she didn't take part at first, but when she found she could hardly even afford cooking oil, it was the last straw. She told a relative that she made the equivalent of only $40 in December, down from an already paltry $300 to $400 average for the past year. On January 8th, she made plans with her friends to join the protests. That night, Iranians poured into the streets of at least 192 cities across Iran's 31 provinces, according to the US-based human rights activist news agency. They were quite possibly the biggest anti-government rallies since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The diversity of the crowds across social and economic classes was greater than in past marches. The beautician's videos show protesters filling a main boulevard in Karaj, Their confidence bolstered by their numbers, they walk unhurriedly among the trees, women, men, and children chanting "Death to Khamenei," referring to Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Some set up bonfires and form protest circles around them. It is not clear from her videos how the violence began. One video shows protesters lined up outside a police station, cheering while a fire burned inside. From inside the station, police fired tear gas and shotgun pellets. The beautician said in a message, "Live ammunition quickly followed." The beautician wrote to her relative that she saw nearly 20 people shot in her immediate circle. The parents of a family friend were shot and killed as they tried to help a wounded person. Another friend's father was killed, and authorities later made her daughter pay the equivalent of $4,500 to release his body. In one video, a group huddled over a wounded protester, her leg covered in blood. They frantically looked for a way to stop it. "Do you have a scarf, a headscarf, anything?" one person shouted. Another said, "We can't go to the hospital," apparently out of a fear of being detained. Another interjected in a panic, "Tie it tight and fasten it." The government has put the death toll from the wave of nationwide protests at more than 3,000, and Khamenei has denounced them as a coup. Fallout from Epstein files felt more in Europe. A prince, an ambassador, senior diplomats, top politicians, all brought down by the Jeffrey Epstein files, and all in Europe rather than the United States. The huge trove of Epstein documents released by the U.S. Justice Department has sent shockwaves through Europe's political, economic, and social elites, dominating headlines, ending careers, and spurring political and criminal investigations. Former UK ambassador to Washington Peter Mandelson was fired and could go to prison. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces a leadership crisis over the Mandelson appointment. Senior figures have fallen in Norway, Sweden, and Slovakia, and even before the latest batch of files, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, brother of King Charles III, lost his honors, princely title, and taxpayer-funded mansion. Apart from the former Prince Andrew, none of them faces claims of sexual wrongdoing. They've been toppled for maintaining friendly relationships with Epstein after he became a convicted sex offender. Epstein collected powerful people the way others collect frequent flyer points, said Mark Stevens, a specialist in international and human rights law at Howard Kennedy in London. But the receipts are now in public, and some might wish they traveled less. The documents were published after a public frenzy over Epstein became a crisis for President Donald Trump's administration and led to a rare bipartisan effort to force the government to open its investigative files. But in the U.S., the long-sought publication has not brought the same public reckoning with Epstein's associates, at least so far. Rob Ford, a professor of political science at the University of Manchester, said that in Britain, if you're in those files, it's immediately a big story. It suggests to me we have a more functional media, we have a more functional accountability structure, that there is still a degree of shame in politics in terms of people will say, "This is just not acceptable. This is just not done," he said. The British repercussions. UK figures felled by their ties to Epstein include the former Prince Andrew, who paid millions to settle a lawsuit with one of Epstein's victims and is facing pressure to testify in the US, and his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson, whose charity shut down this past week. Like others now ensnared, veteran politician Mandelson long downplayed his relationship with Epstein, despite calling him, quote, my best pal in 2003. The new files revealed contact continued for years after the financier's 2008 prison term for sexual offenses involving a minor. In a July 2009 message, Mandelson appeared to refer to Epstein's release from prison as, quote, Liberation Day. Starmer fired Mandelson in September over earlier revelations about his Epstein ties, but now British police are investigating whether Mandelson committed misconduct in public office by passing on sensitive government information to Epstein. Starmer has apologized to Epstein's victims and pledged to release public documents that will show Mandelson lied when he was being vetted for the ambassador's job. That may not be enough to stop furious lawmakers trying to eject the prime minister from office after his failure of judgment. The American associates Experts caution that Britain shouldn't be too quick to pat itself on the back over its rapid reckoning with Mendelssohn. The US has a better record than the UK when it comes to declassifying and publishing information, but Alex Thomas, executive director of the Institute of Government think tank, said there's something about parliamentary democracy, with its need for a prime minister to retain the confidence of parliament to stay in office, that I think does help drive accountability. A few high-profile Americans have faced repercussions over their friendly ties with Epstein. Most prominent is former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, who went on leave from academic positions at Harvard University late last year. Brad Karp quit last week as chair of the U.S. law firm Paul Weiss after revelations in the latest batch of documents, and the NFL said it would investigate Epstein's relationship with New York Giants co-owner Steve Tisch, who exchanged sometimes crude emails with Epstein about potential dates with adult women. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time for our morning listeners is 9:30 a.m., and for our afternoon listeners, the time is 4:30 p.m. States move to ban NDAs around child sexual abuse. Cindy Clemshire was 12 years old on a Christmas night in 1982 when a traveling evangelist staying with her family first abused her. According to Clemshire, the sexual abuse continued over the next 4 years. She eventually told her family and the abuse stopped, but her abuser, Robert Morris, went on to found Gateway Church in Texas, which became one of the largest megachurches in the nation. When Clemshire sought restitution in 2007, Morris's attorney offered her $25,000 if she would sign a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent her from speaking publicly about the abuse. She refused. Had I agreed to the NDA, Robert would have continued to have power over me, Clemshire told Texas lawmakers last May as she urged them to pass a state law that would ban non-disclosure agreements in child sexual abuse civil cases. Because I refused to sign that NDA at 37, she said, I'm able to sit here today at 55 years old and share my story in hopes of helping others. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, a Republican, signed the bill into law late last June. Texas joined other states, including California, Missouri, and Tennessee, in prohibiting non-disclosure agreements, or NDAs, from being used in civil settlements that involves child and, in some states, adult sexual abuse. Morris pleaded guilty to child sexual abuse charges in October, publicly admitting what he did to Clemshire. This year, Clemshire's home state of Oklahoma, as well as Alabama and Georgia, are considering similar laws. Oklahoma's bill was introduced this past week. Last month, Alabama lawmakers unanimously passed identical bills in the state House and Senate. If one of the bills passes in the other chamber, it will head to the governor's desk. In Georgia, Republican Governor Brian Kemp announced during his final State of the State address last month that he would support a version of the law. Many of the new bills are versions of Trey's Law, model legislation first passed in Missouri, named for Trey Carlock, a survivor of child sexual abuse. Carlock died by suicide in 2019 at the age of 28. Though his abuser was convicted of sexually abusing several boys, Carlock had signed an NDA in a civil settlement that prevented him from speaking about his abuse at Canuck, a popular Christian sports camp based in Missouri, and the camp's role in enabling the abuse. Elizabeth Phillips, Carlock's sister, later founded the Trey's Law movement in his memory. Trey's Law works to get NDA bans passed at the state and federal levels. Such bills attempt to address civil litigation issue that gained increased attention during the Me Too movement. Organizations such as Canuck that are caught up in child abuse cases sometimes offer financial settlements to abuse survivors in exchange for their signing agreements that legally restrict them from speaking publicly about the abuse or the organization's role in it. Critics of these kinds of NDAs say they're a tool, originally intended to protect confidential corporate information that's been misused to suppress survivors' stories and shield organizations that enable abuse. NDAs may be presented as a legal formality, but in cases like mine, they are tools that continue the abuse, Clemshire told Texas lawmakers last year. They protect the abuser and keep victims in shame. State laws vary in their protections. California enacted a law in 2016 banning NDAs for felony sex offenses, child sexual abuse, and sexual assault against vulnerable adults, such as older adults and those with disabilities. Tennessee's 2018 law voids NDAs in child sexual assault claims. New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania have placed restrictions on NDAs. Various courts have also struck down some NDAs that appeared to be designed to hide misconduct. There's not currently a federal law analogous to Trey's law, though Congress has tried to address the issue. The 2022 Federal Speak Out Act specifically targets preemptive NDAs used in workplaces. It nullifies non-disclosure contracts that are signed, often as a condition of employment, before a dispute involving sexual assault or sexual harassment happens. But the law doesn't apply to NDAs signed after the allegations are made. Much of the new state legislation, such as in Oklahoma and Texas, applies retroactively, nullifying older NDAs. Alabama's bill would only apply to contracts entered into or amended after the measure is signed into law. It's difficult to find public detractors for such legislation. It's one of the few issues that has, so far, united both sides of the political aisle. In the handful of states that have enacted bans on NDAs in sexual assault cases, they passed with near unanimous or unanimous bipartisan support. New Archbishop in New York calls for building unity. Ronald Hicks was installed Friday as the 11th Archbishop of New York in a ceremony at the revered St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan, calling on Catholics to spread the faith while respecting all people and helping the vulnerable. With a few thousand people in the cathedral and hundreds more packing the streets outside, the retiring Cardinal Timothy Dolan, in an elaborate mass that included choir singing, prayers, and readings from the gospel, were called to be a missionary church, a church that catechizes, evangelizes, and puts our faith into action, Hicks said. A church made up of missionary disciples who go out and make disciples, passing the faith on from one generation to the next. A church that takes care of the poor and the vulnerable. A church that defends, respects, and upholds life from conception to natural death. The change in leadership represents a significant new chapter for the U.S. Catholic Church, which is foregoing a new era with the Chicago-born Pope Leo XIV as the first American pontiff, and the U.S. hierarchy have already shown willingness to change the Trump administration on immigration and other issues, and Hicks is seen as very much a Leo-style bishop. Hicks, age 58, was most recently Bishop of Joliet, Illinois, some 50 miles southwest of Chicago. He now leads one of the largest archdioceses in the nation that serves roughly 2.5 million Catholics in Manhattan, the Bronx, and Staten Island in New York City, as well as 7 counties to the north. Paying homage to New York, Hicks read a mashup he made from lines from famous songs about the city. So start spreading the news. I'm starting today, he declared, playing on the lyrics of Frank Sinatra's New York, New York. The Pope chose Hicks in December to replace Dolan, a prominent conservative figure in the U.S. Catholic hierarchy. Dolan had submitted his resignation in February 2025 as required when he turned 75. Friday was Dolan's 76th birthday. Hicks' appointment came shortly after Dolan finalized a plan to establish a $300 million fund to compensate victims of sexual abuse who had sued the archdiocese. Hicks called for a church that cares for creation, builds bridges, listens to and protects children, promotes healing for survivors, and all those who've been wounded by the church. A church that shows respect for all, building unity across cultures and generations. The ceremony began when Hicks stood outside the cathedral in his red robe and white mitre and knocked on the front doors 3 times with a small mallet. He was welcomed into the building by Dolan and received loud applause from the crowd inside. Cardinal Christophe Pierre, the apostolic nuncio to the United States, read the official letter from the Pope, declaring Hicks as the new Archbishop of New York. Hicks then showed the letter to those in attendance before being led by Dolan and Pierre to the cathedral, the Archbishop's chair. Hicks officially became the Archbishop when he sat down in the cathedra. Among the attendees were Catholic Church leaders and laity and representatives from other faiths, government, business, labor, education, the arts, and first responders. Some of Hicks' relatives attended while his parents watched a live stream from their home. Hicks made some of his remarks in Spanish, acknowledging the city's large Hispanic population. Frida Cabreja, a Queens resident, was among the crowd outside the cathedral cheering Hicks. I feel incredible because this is a memorable and historic day, she said. I do believe he brings peace and humanity. This country right now, especially most of New York, and in the States, there's a very big crisis of humanity. Right now, we're considered not being an American, even if we are citizens. Hicks grew up in South Holland, Illinois, a short distance from the suburban Chicago childhood home of Leo, the former Robert Prevost. Like Prevost, who spent 20 years as a missionary in Peru, Hicks worked for 5 years in El Salvador, heading a church-run orphanage program that operated in 9 Latin American and Caribbean countries. He served as a parish priest in Chicago and dean of training in Mundelein Seminary before Chicago Cardinal Blaise Cupich made him vicar general of the archdiocese in 2015. 3 years later, Hicks was made an auxiliary bishop, and in 2020, Pope Francis named him Bishop of Joliet, serving around 520,000 Catholics in 7 counties. Hicks referenced Leo several times and noted the Pope's own call for a missionary purpose, saying, quote, "We exist to follow Jesus, who fed the hungry, healed those ill in body and spirit, rejected hatred, and proclaimed love." You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time for our morning listeners is 9:40 a.m., and for our afternoon listeners, the time is 4:40 p.m. And now on to business news. Data center developer seeks $774 million from Genesee County. Stream Data Center's proposed data center campus in Genesee County is getting bigger in many ways, but the controversy over the project remains. The Dallas-based developer now intends to build a data center campus valued at $11.8 billion, almost double the $6.3 billion in its initial proposal. The campus would be twice as large at 2.2 million square feet, consisting of 3 two-story buildings. The site would use 500 megawatts of electricity instead of 250 megawatts, and Stream is now seeking $774 million in incentives from the Genesee County Economic Development Center, 64% higher than the $472 million the developer had sought before. Meanwhile, the estimated size of the workforce, 125 employees, is the essentially unchanged portion from the initial plan. The planned project on 90 acres of the Science, Technology, and Advanced Manufacturing Park, or STAMP, is attracting attention for its local impact. The project is also part of a wider debate happening around the country regarding data centers' economic development value. Stream argues its data center campus will abide by rules safeguarding the environment while benefiting the community through jobs, investment, and tax revenues. "Our employees will be the local employees," said Bradley Wells, a senior site selection and development manager with Stream. "It's the people that are living in the community. Opponents see the project as a costly intrusion. The Tonawanda Seneca Nation says the data center campus will be harmful to wildlife, the environment, and its way of life." The idea of directing this much public money to a project that so seriously threatens the health and well-being of our nation is outrageous, said Grandel Bird Hallett Logan, a spokesman. "The state of New York already took most of our land, and now GCEDC wants to use public money to destroy what's left." Stream's proposal was chosen by the GCEDC, which owns STAMP, over 2 competing proposals in 2025. Stream later notified the GCEDC that the project was expanding, requiring an amended application and new environmental review. Data centers are considered essential to support the growth of artificial intelligence. But critics say data centers use a lot of energy and often receive massive incentives in exchange for relatively few jobs. They also say the power-hungry facilities put added strain on the state's electric grid and drive up power prices for consumers as supplies tighten. Wells said nearly 1,000 temporary construction workers will be needed to build the 3 facilities. Stream aims to have the first of those 3 buildings completed in 2027. As for the permanent workforce, Wells said those jobs will include software engineers as well as technicians responsible for the facility's mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. Stream will lease its data center facilities at STAMP to a single tenant, which Stream has not identified. Wells said around the country, Stream's clients are Fortune 50 and Fortune 100 companies. Wells said Stream will take steps to limit water use and light and noise emissions at the campus. Stream is a company that's been around for 26 years and operates these facilities nationwide, so we'll have a high standard of operational and developmental expertise to bring here, he said. The data center campus would use energy capacity already approved for the stamp site, he said. Any additional infrastructure that is required for the project is paid for by Stream and not by local residents. The GCEDC will serve as the lead agency for the environmental review. The Tonawanda Seneca Nation and its allies opposed that, calling for the State Department of Environmental Conservation to take the lead role. In an unusual move, though, Orleans County also called for the DEC to lead the environmental review instead of the GCEDC. There can be no real dispute that GCEDC's biased position compromises its objectivity and presents not only the appearance of impropriety, but an obvious conflict of interest which disqualifies it from acting as lead agency, said Lynn Johnson, chairman of the Orleans County Legislature, in a letter to DEC officials. Adam Walters, a lawyer for the GCEDC, defended the agency's position in his own letter to DEC officials. Walters also claimed, quote, the motivations for Orleans County objections appear to be based on so-called sour grapes regarding failed efforts to secure a multi-billion-dollar project and past litigation defeats rather than an honest concern about GCEDC serving as lead agency. Chipping in, how parents can manage the cost of their child's wedding. In recent years, spring has yielded to fall as the most popular season for weddings, with 32% of ceremonies taking place in September and October, compared with just 12% in June, according to The Knot, a wedding planning website. Another tradition that is quietly changing: who pays the bill? With the average cost of a wedding now at $36,000, the customary split, the bride's family pays for the ceremony and reception, while the groom's family handles the rehearsal dinner, is shifting to a more collaborative approach. These days, it's common to see everyone chipping in where they can, including the couple, both sets of parents, and sometimes even the grandparents, says Jessica Bishop, founder of the BudgetSavvyBride.com. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. Hoping to contribute to your child's dream wedding without breaking the family bank? Here's what to expect. Number 1, set your own budget first. Whether you've been saving for your child's wedding for years or a recent engagement triggered the discussion, assessing how much you can reasonably afford before you commit to any amount with the couple is critical, says Chris Maximovich, president of Global Wealth Advisors in Lewisville, Texas. A lot of parents feel guilt if they can't give as much as they think the folks next door did, Maximovich said. But you don't want to promise something you can't deliver, and you don't want to be eating ramen noodles for the rest of your life to throw a big party either. Run the numbers. Your financial advisor or money management tools such as Monarch Money or YNAB can help to come up with a fixed dollar amount. That's preferable to saying you'll pay for a certain part of the wedding or the entire reception. Costs can easily balloon out of control when, in effect, you give a blank check, Maximovich says. Number 2, get everyone involved. Once you've settled on an amount, sit down with the couple to talk about how much you'll be able to contribute so they can plan based on facts, not assumptions. Having expectations without a discussion or agreement is what causes tension, Bishop says. Ideally, both sets of parents will be involved. According to wedding planning website Zola.com, nearly 2/3 of engaged couples get financial support from both families, compared with 30% for whom the bride's family is solely responsible. Couples themselves are contributing more too. A survey last year by The Knot found, on average, families are roughly splitting the bill, with parents covering 51% of the wedding costs and the couple getting married picking up the rest. And number 3, find ways to save. The biggest driver of costs is the number of guests in attendance. Every guest adds to your catering, rentals, invitations, favors, and space needs, so trimming your list is like a built-in budget hack, says Bishop. A lower-cost way to include everyone the couple and families want to be part of the celebration: host an intimate formal wedding for immediate family and close friends only, then throw a big party later at a restaurant or in one of the family's backyards for a larger group. Maximovich says one of his clients recently did this, and the wedding came in at 1/10 of the cost originally budgeted. The couple then used half the remaining budget to host a big party at a restaurant, with enough money left over to pay for their honeymoon and part of the down payment on their first home. Other ways to save include having the wedding during off-season, think January or February, on a weekday or during the day instead of an evening event. Limiting fresh flowers, often costly, can help too. In the end, helping your child stay on budget may be as valuable as any financial contribution you make. Parents want to show up for their kids in big ways, but the best gift you can give is your support and love, not your retirement savings, Bishop says. As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. That number again being 716-821-5555. Mary D. Dolly Arnaldo ni Montemarano. Nancy Baker Almeter. Marcia Barron ni Sarnecki. Michael A. Bingeman. Mark B. Breyer. June M. Brown ni Ross. Francis A. Carlino. Joan B. Davis ni Bishop. Geraldine E. Donati. Douglas D. Eady. Deborah Renee Feldman. Marcia K. Fenton. Carol M. Florzak ni Promoda. Kenneth Ellsworth Gill. Leroy L. Heath Jr. Joy Herlin ni Richmond. Larry H. Hare. Heather Lynn Hurley ni Princess. Francis M. Kitsky ni Rickard. Joyce C. Kruger ni Sug. Nicholas J. Krupp. Barbara A. Larkin ni Galbo. Ronald Lewandowski. Mary B. Litwin ni Tim. Robert C. Lorenzetti. George R. Mira. Deborah Major. Jerry Marchinetta. Alexander Margaret P. McDonnell Alexander. Edward W. Michael. Melissa Page. Helen Peacock Hafner. Judith A. Pedro Piorin. Gloria L. Post. Joseph Anthony Racco. Carolyn Lee Reed. Paul J. Richter. Richard Dick Sander. John M. Santamoro. Roger Schützes. David G. Schoenthal. Harry A. Shugart. Daniel Selkirk. Patricia Shaw. Edward H. Scarrett. Brian K. Snyder. Francis D. Dawn Snyder. Barbara A. Soder ni Johnson. Deacon Stephen J. Swarovski. Paul Geza Sewer. Andrew F. Annis Visinski. Gerald A. Jerry Warren. Gerald Wolin. Marion P. Welch. Mary Ann Orlowski ni Burzik. Thaddeus Ted J. Wojcinski. Mary McGavern Worrell. If you need further information on these names, please call us again at 716-821-5555. That number again being 716-821-5555. And now it's Royal Stars Horoscopes with Georgia Nichols. Happy birthday for Sunday, February 8th, 2026. You're intuitive, personable, and creative. Many of you have a flair for technology and musical talent. This is a slower-paced year. Take time to rest and rejuvenate your energies and outlook. The stars will show what kind of day you'll have. 5 being dynamic, 4 being positive, 3 being average, 2 is so-so, and 1 is just difficult. For Aries, it's a 3-star day. Something unexpected might happen with a friend today. They might say or do something that catches you off guard, or perhaps you'll meet someone different and unusual. Tonight, a financial favor. For Taurus, a 2-star day. Steer clear of arguments with authority figures. It won't go well. However, someone in authority also might know you. It might help you in an unexpected way. Who knows? Tonight, warm feelings. For Gemini, a 3-star day. Travel plans might suddenly be delayed or canceled, or alternatively, you might have to travel when you didn't expect to or want to. Expect to do so. Tonight, work satisfaction. Cancer, a 2-star day. Keep your pockets open because unexpected gifts, goodies, and favors from others might come your way. However, keep an eye on your banking and assets. Tonight, socialize. For Leo, a 2-star day. Today's unpredictable. Relations with those who are closest to you might suddenly change, and you might be surprised. Tonight, relax and be happy. For Virgo, a 2-star day. Your work routine might suddenly change today. Staff shortages, power outages, and computer problems might make things go sideways. So tonight, happy conversations. For Libra, a 3-star day. This is a dicey day dealing with your kids. Parents will have to be patient. Meanwhile, social occasions might suddenly change. Tonight, a bonus. For Scorpio, a 2-star day. Something unexpected might impact your home and family today. It could be pleasant or it could be troublesome. Tonight, you feel good. Sagittarius, a 2-star day. This is an accident-prone day. A distraction could lead to an argument, hurt feelings, or something unusual. Today, quiet relaxation. For Capricorn, a 3-star day. Keep an eye on your money and possessions today to avoid loss, theft, or damage. Meanwhile, a little windfall might come your way. Tonight, friendships. Aquarius, people notice you today, which is why you want to avoid a public argument. Ironically, something unexpected will help you. Tonight, you're admired. And for Pisces, a 3-star day. Today, something unexpected might please you, but you might be doing a slow boil because you're angry about something, but feel you can't speak up. Tonight, travel plans. And on this day in history, February 8th, in 1587, Mary Queen of Scots was beheaded at Fotheringhay Castle in England after she was implicated in a plot to murder her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I. In 1693, a charter was granted for the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg in the Virginia colony. In 1904, Japan launched a surprise attack on the Russian Navy at Port Arthur, now Delhi in China, marking the start of the Russo-Japan War. In 1910, the Boy Scouts of America organization was incorporated by William D. Boyce, who drew inspiration from the British Boy Scout movement. In 1924, the first U.S. execution using lethal gas took place at the Nevada State Prison in Carson City, as Chinese immigrant Guy Zhang was put to death for a murder conviction. In 1936, the first NFL draft was held at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Philadelphia. In 1949, Roman Catholic Cardinal Joseph Mindszenty was sentenced to life in prison for his opposition to the fascist and later communist Hungarian governments. Released during the 1956 Hungarian Revolution, he sought asylum at the U.S. Embassy when the Soviet Union invaded, living there for 15 years. Mindszenty left Hungary in 1971 and died in exile while in Vienna in 1975. And lastly, in 1960, work began on what would become the Hollywood Walk of Fame. You've been listening to a reading of articles for the Buffalo News for Sunday, February 8th on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your reader for this hour has been Edwin J. Vieira, and for the second hour, your reader will be Ron Nickelman. Stay tuned, and thank you for listening.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
continue now with a reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your reader is Ron Dickelman. Father's son gets prison term for deadly drug conspiracy. A federal judge Friday sentenced Levon Parks of Niagara Falls to 30 years in prison and his father to 20 years for their roles in narcotics conspiracy that turned deadly. 30 years is as low as I could go, said U.S. District Judge Lawrence Villardo of the son's sentence, calling the case tragic for a lot of reasons. A federal jury 2 years ago convicted Parks and his father, Parks 35 and his father 61, of all counts in the shooting death of Kevin O'Turner, 21, an up-and-coming Buffalo rapper whom prosecutors said became a top target for selling drugs to Levon Parks customers. The two were sentenced Friday in separate court proceedings, hours apart from each other. Levon Parks' cell phone record shows a prolific history of drug trafficking and violence in a narcotics conspiracy from May of 2017 to March of 2019. That stretched from Buffalo, Niagara Falls, and Lackawanna to Pennsylvania, Georgia, Puerto Rico, according to prosecutors. He brought destruction and pain wherever he went. Assistant U.S. Attorney Richard Antoine said of Levon Parks. Antoine asked the judge to impose a life sentence for Levon Parks, saying he has not demonstrated an ounce of remorse. Prosecutors have said Levon Parks fired 6 shots, killing Turner on the afternoon of January 21st, 2018, as Turner exited a residence at the 1800 block of Niagara Street in Niagara Falls. Levon Parks, concerned about his drug territory, drove around the neighborhood with his father shortly before Turner was killed, prosecutors said. 2 crack users who sold heroin for Levon Parks texted that when Turner was at their apartment building. Prosecutors called it a setup. Levon Parks know when and where to find Turner. After their trial 2 years ago, jurors heard from 43 government witnesses in over 15 days, and then the 2 defense witnesses. Neither Levon nor James Parks testified. The investigation included controlled buys and payments involving Levon Parks, and with investigators seizing 8.5 kilograms of cocaine and $52,000 in cash from postal parcels shipped from Puerto Rico to various locations in western New York and other states, according to the U.S. Attorney General's office. Throughout the trial, Levon Parks maintained his innocence and contested the government's characterization of the shooting. Well, he asked the lawyer for a 20-year prison sentence. While the jury's verdict established that Levon Parks fired the shot that killed Turner, the verdict did not resolve the question of whether the killing was premeditated or whether it arose from spontaneous confrontation, defense attorney Cheryl Myers both said in the court filing. So the possibility remains that Park acted in self-defense, or at least of passion, she said. Myers both said the government never proved at the trial that Levon Parks was a blood gang member or that Turner was taking over Parks' drug territory. There was no evidence at the trial that Levon Parks was a street-level dealer like Turner, or that Turner was his rival, Myers Booth argued. A witness who lived on the 1800 block of Niagara Street for 11 years testified at the trial that she knew that Levon Parks from the neighborhood, and he did not have a reputation for violence. A police officer testified the area where the killing occurred was an open drug market, and not territory controlled by any person or gang, Myers Booth said. All but would rule out premeditation, Myers Booth said. The judge disagreed. I think there's enough evidence of intent to kill. Villardo said if attorney Barry Donahoe, representing James Parks, sought to poke holes in the government's assertion that the father was involved in Turner's death. James Parks was not the shooter. Donahoe told the judge James Parks was not with the shooter. James Parks did not drive the shooter from the shooting scene. James Parks did not kill Kevin Turner, who was not even there. Donahoe said 3 previous government witnesses at the trial were at the top of the food chain in the government's claimed conspiracy, and none of them testified that James Parks was in a conspiracy to sell drugs. The judge sentenced both their convictions of conspiracy to distribute cocaine, fentanyl, and heroin and discharge of a firearm in the furtherance of drug trafficking crime. Velardo pushed back on the prosecutor's assertion that the father was there every step of the way. Of his son's crimes, the father's presence pre-sentence report described him as a minor participant in conspiracy, and Antoine acknowledged the father was less culpable than the son. Still, his job as a father was to steer his son in the right direction. Antoine said he didn't do that. He got involved in his son's drug trafficking and helped him plan a murder. It's not a bad person, James Parks said. I'm not a bad person, James Parks said. He asked the judge to consider his 30 years at the National Guard duty and combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan in fashioning his sentence. The judge did so, imposing the lowest possible sentence he could. Levon Parks, during a statement to the court, asked the judge to show some mercy today. He said he just turned to prayer and reading the Bible during 5 years he spent in pretrial custody. The life I was living before wasn't life I should have, Levon Parks told the judge. I have repented to God, he said. Levon Parks said he was angry when Velardo reminded him to pretrial custody, reminded him to pretrial custody when the charges were filed in 2019. At the time, I could not see past the frustration, he wrote in the recent letter to the judge. Looking back now, I recognize the decision is one of the most important turning points of my life. It was Niagara County Jail, reading the Lord's Prayer from Gideon's Bible, where I received Jesus Christ, my Savior and Lord. That moment changed everything for me, and now I'm 5.5 years into my walk with Christ, a new creation, as Scripture said. Parks said he would accept with respect whatever sentence the judge imposed and vowed to serve the Lord. I will use my time wherever I am to minister to others, to be a productive, law-abiding citizen, he told the judge. Velardo said he was glad to hear Levon Parks was preaching inside jails. Parks has come across as likable, smart, and charismatic over the years. His case preceded, the judge said. Choosing crime has cost us freedom for decades. You could have had a hell of a life being successful with things consistent with the law, Velardo told him. Shake Shack plans for Kenmore upsets preservation allies. The former Kenmore Presbyterian Church has stood near the village border with Buffalo for 100 years. But imposing brick structure doesn't have much of a prayer of making it to 101. That's because the building's owner wants to tear it down and replace it with a Shake Shack restaurant. The prospect has some historic preservation advocates feeling heartburn. If it gets demolished, I believe this will be a catalyst for the neighborhood to make a decision on whether to prioritize its beautiful, historic, walkable, family-friendly corridor, said Bernice Radel, the executive director of Presbyterian Hall, Buffalo, Niagara. The church on Delaware Avenue, just north of Kenmore Avenue, hosted services from 1926 to 2022, when a shrinking congregation moved and later sold to a longtime home. The Rochester-based owners of the church last month unveiled a plan for the region's third full-service Shake Shack and a separate 2-story structure in retail apartments. The developer exploring reusing the church building, but determined it can't be salvaged, attorney Jeff Talumbo said. I know if it made sense, we would do it, but it doesn't in this case, he told the Buffalo News. The church doesn't have historic landmark status that would bar its demolition. Still, preservationists and others say Shake Shack doesn't fit in a village where locally owned restaurants, coffee shops, and bars abound. They also say they don't want to see Kenmore lose another piece of its history to a wrecking ball. Blown out building. News of the proposal came just shortly before the village board held a hearing on the project January 20th. Development group led by Mark Lester revealed plans to rebuild a 1-story Shake Shack with no drive-through where the former church stands. Lester said his engineers determined it was impractical to reuse the church building according to the meeting minutes. The roof needs to be replaced, the asbestos, and the abatement is expensive. It's a new building. It's just a building. It's worn out, Palumbo said in an interview. Several residents expressed concern about the Shake Shack bringing extra traffic to the already busy Delaware Avenue and nearby side streets. The church building is at 2765 Delaware Avenue between East Hazeltine and Parkwood Avenues. Traffic coming north into Kenmore from Buffalo merges from 2 lanes into one there. First sale fell through. The First Presbyterian Church moved to 2765 Delaware and loaned donated by village founder Louis P. Eberhard and opened a wood frame chapel in 1890. A growing congregation later constructed the brick edifice that opened in 1926. Kenmore Presbyterian Church, which has a marquee but no staple and known for 1100 when it opened, and congregation grew to 2,000 according to church history. However, as with the mainline Protestant denominations, membership fell over time, dwindling to just several dozen regular attendees. By 2020, members opted to find a smaller home and sell 2675 Delaware Avenue, which also had a classroom and office space. In 2022, developer Sam Savarino unveiled plans to convert the three-story church into 35 apartments. However, the Savarino sale, along with at least one other, fell through when the Larry Lester Group bought the church for $1.6 million, and the congregation moved to 576 Delaware Road, home of St. Mark's Evangelical Church. Craig Avery, a longtime Presbyterian member, was the listing agent. He also at peace with the church's demolition. The congregation is really the church, not the building. Avery said it would be nice to see if the building used in the firm that it was sold, but hey, things change. We're moving forward. Frozen Falls becomes an off-season hotspot. Rare Spectacle provides a prime cool-cation destination. Buffalo Next Tourism. A frozen Niagara Falls is not something you see every day. When the ice creeps into the cataract's edges and mist hardens into glassy formations, it turns the world wonder into something few visitors ever see. Rare Spectacle gives locals and tourists alike a new reason to stop by the falls during the off-season. Renewed interest may give the falls a boost, swapping out elements of one key demographic for another, and it's something tourism professionals are hoping to capitalize on as a global trend takes hold toward cool locations which favor cooler climates and off-season experience over overheated and overcrowded hotspots. Next week, Niagara Falls will host the International Inbound Travel Association's annual summit, bringing 200 tourism professionals to experience the falls in Niagara County in February, not in spite of the region's snow and cold temperatures, but because of them. Western New Yorkers bundled up from head to toe, scraping ice from windshields, shoveling snow that just won't stop falling, may wonder, is this really the time to be showing off? But it turns out something we take for granted is a sought-after bucket list experience for others. Event planner hosting the International Inbound Travel Association's annual summit pitched Niagara Falls as a winter showcase, betting that the partially frozen falls combined with lower prices and dramatic cool weather scenery would make a compelling case for the off-season travel. Cool locations favor cooler destinations and shoulder seasons, giving industry insiders a chance to experience what Niagara Falls can offer when the ice, rather than the summer crowds, takes the center stage. Representatives from IITA want to start promoting cooler destinations that have a draw for international visitors, making Niagara Falls, USA a perfect fit, said Sarah Cerrone, spokesperson for Destination Niagara, the Niagara Region's Tourism Bureau, which has been preparing this event for a year. Rather than baking in the sun or traipsing around tropics, warmer global temperatures have travelers looking into cooler climates like Canada, Alaska, and Nordic countries like Sweden and Iceland. There are certainly people who draw with snow. But I think, well, in our cases, it's about doing something unique. It's about seeing things that nobody else has seen, said Lisa Simon, CEO and Executive Director of IITA. Destination Niagara has been trying to prepare members for the cold, and will give out swags with warm, branded winter hat and gloves. They'll go sightseeing in Youngstown, Lewiston, Niagara Falls, and North Tonawanda, in addition to conference programming and other events such as Places' Brickyard Brewing Company and Rainbow Air's new tourism center. It's bragging rights. Oh my gosh, I saw Niagara Falls when it's frozen. So many people ever get to see that. Nearly a third of European travelers seek out cool destinations to avoid extreme heat conditions during the summer months, according to a report from the European Travel Commission. The shift is the highest among travelers from places like Spain, Italy, and Greece, which have experienced heat waves in recent years. And while this coming week's visitors will be considering year-round travel, winter will very much take center stage. The winter packages are something that's very unique to a lot of adventure travelers, Simon said. There's a lot of outdoor people who love the winter and love hiking. They love skiing and doing different, unique things that they don't just get to do, perhaps. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Radio reading service. The time is 15 minutes past the hour. Water main break on Hurdle proves costly for rockers. Lauren Clifford has been playing with local rock bands for 24 years. Until Wednesday night, she never felt like she had to run for her life after a performance. Clifford, who was one of about 25 local musicians who had to flee from her Avenel rehearsal studio after a massive water main break flooded the area on Hurdle and Military Road. She told the news she was practicing with a jam band called Intero Bang when she heard a lot of growing men yelling outside. She said several other bands were practicing in the building at the same time. We opened the door to look outside and saw a huge amount of very cold water pouring into the building. That's where there were all kinds of police officers, firefighters, and EMTs out there yelling to get out of the building as fast as possible, Clifford said. He estimated about 25 musicians hurried out of the building and got into the NFT bus, and rescuers had brought to the scene to take the musicians to safety. A lot of us were carrying our instruments up over our heads as we waded out of the building into the bus. The bus took us to a police station to warm up. The EMTs kept asking us if we're okay, Clifford said. A similar story was told by Andrew Lufke, 46, who was practicing with a new band called Birdie when the flood began. I've been a musician since I was 12 and seen some crazy things, but what scared me about this was how fast the water came in the building and how powerful it was, Lipke said. I helped a lot of people get out, but when I could no longer open the door because the water was so high, for a while I was trapped in there by myself. Lufke said he felt bad for the many musicians who were out of the building to protect their gear when the flood hit. He said he and his band saved most of their own gear from damage. I also put a lot of people's gear up on higher ground before I got out there, Lipke said. According to the nonprofit organization Music is Art, dozens of local musicians lost their instruments and other gear when a massive water main break flooded the building in and around Military Hurdle intersection. Clifford said her band lost 2 bass drums, 2 speakers, and some microphones to flood damage. Some of the local bands have reported losing as much as $10,000 in musical instruments and gear, which were stored in the building, said Sarah Elizabeth, program director of Music is Art. Lufke said he was understanding that about 40 bands used the one-story building on Hurdle and Military to store gear for rehearsals. It'd be difficult for some local bands to find rehearsal space and recover from financial losses, said Dwayne Hall, founder of the legendary Sportsman's Tavern, located on Amber Street, not far from the flood scene. Local musicians, as a general rule, are not wealthy people, said Dwayne Hall, who plays in a local band called the Twain Gang. Losing a few $1,000s worth of equipment is not easy for them. For a lot of musicians, a favorite instrument, amplifier, or microphone is very important to them, like the extension of their soul, Jason Hall said. Clifford said she can relate to that. She took great pains to get her favorite Gibson acoustic guitar out of the building safely. As I got near the door, a firefighter reached his hand to take me out, to help me outside. I handed him my guitar and said, "Take this, then get me out." But Clifford suffered another painful loss to the flood, her 2018 Ford SUV, which had been purchased for $11,000 just one day earlier. My new car was ruined, and now I'm looking for another one, she said, adding several other musicians' cars were also damaged. Mayor Sean Ryan and many other city officials were at the scene Wednesday night. Ryan said firefighters rescued about 8 people who were stranded in cars using rescue rafts to take them to safety. Repair work at the site began Thursday morning. City officials said the big water transmission line, 36 inches, was a lot of water, came out really fast. According to Music is Art, the city law department is helping people who lost instruments and equipment in the flood file claims with the city for reimbursement. They said affected by the flood those affected by the flood should call the law department at 716-851-4343 for assistance and information. Music is Art, founded by Google Dolls member Robbie Takak, posted the following information on Facebook late Thursday. If you haven't heard, many local bands' practice spaces were flooded by last night's water main break, and dozens of your favorite Buffalo musicians are out of thousands of dollars worth of gear. If you have any instrument, amps, PA gear, etc., that is pro gig ready, and you're willing to part with, please drop off at our drop-off locations below ASAP, or contact Sarah Elizabeth at musicisart.org to organize pickup. Music is Art said donations of instruments and gear will be accepted at Third Space Cafe and Entertainment, 777 Main Street, Buffalo, and Boulevard. Music lessons, 1090 Niagara Falls Boulevard, Tonawanda. Continuing along with local news now. When will the Buffalo Diocese exit what will be the longest Catholic Diocese Chapter 11 case? It took the Diocese of Rochester a week short of 6 years to get its bankruptcy reorganization plan confirmed in September, making it the most protracted Chapter 11 case in the country for a diocese. The dubious distinction won't last. Buffalo Diocese, still very much in the throes of a Chapter 11 case, which began in 2020, will surpass the 6-year mark February 28th. 6 other dioceses or archdioceses filed for Chapter 11 after the Buffalo Diocese already have exited their bankruptcy proceedings. 3 of them, Camden, New Jersey, Norwich, Connecticut, and St. Cloud, Minnesota, did it in less than 4 years. Here's an update on where things stand in the Buffalo case and the answers to some frequently asked questions. What is taking so long? The Buffalo Diocese reached settlement in principle with the official committee of unsecured creditors nearly 10 months ago that calls for the diocese, its parishes, and related Catholic entities, such as Catholic Charities, to contribute to $150 million collectively to a sex abuse settlement trust. The deal was a huge milepost in the Chapter 11 case, but plenty of unfinished business remains before the diocese can rid itself of the financial burden of nearly 900 sex abuse claims and exit bankruptcy proceedings. Among those loose ends, negotiating with insurance companies over what they will pay into the settlement trust, convincing parishes and affiliated Catholic entities to pay into the settlement, selling property to raise additional cash for the settlement, resolving an appeal to a federal bankruptcy court judge's decision, figuring out the procedures by which sex abuse claims will vote on whether to accept terms of the proposed settlement. How much are insurance companies paying toward the settlement? The diocese and its parishes had liability insurance coverage for many of the abuse claims that were filed, with insurer contributions as much as $350 million could end up in the settlement trust, according to the diocese attorney Stephen Donato. Donato also said that a court hearing in January that 95% of insurers had agreed to settle. The details of the agreement have yet to be included in the diocese's disclosure statement, a large legal document required in bankruptcy cases to inform creditors about the debtor's assets and liabilities. Does the diocese have the $150 million pledge for the settlement trust? The diocese officials in the summer broke down where they expected the funds to come from as follows: $15 million from unrestricted diocese funds, $80 million from unrestricted funds of 160 parishes, $10 million from unrestricted funds of several Catholic affiliate entities, including Catholic Charities, Foundation for the Roman Catholic Diocese of Buffalo, Our Lady of Victory, $30 million in parish property sales, $15 million in diocese property sales. In exchange for the contributions, the terms of the settlement call for contributing non-debtor parties to receive the same sex abuse liability protections that the diocese will get. In other words, they can't be sued for the past cases of reported sex abuse by employers and volunteers. To date, more than $120 million in parish, diocese, and related entity funds have been set aside for the settlement, according to Tucker. But there continue to be challenges in securing the rest of the money. Sales of parish properties to date has generated $8.4 million, just over a quarter of the $30 million in total proceeds of the church, rectory, and other parish property sales that the diocese officials expect to make towards the settlement. Meanwhile, diocese property sales have amounted to $5.4 million to date. Diocese officials anticipate they'll need an additional $10 million for selling all their diocese-owned properties. Good news for the diocese and parishes is that they have, for the most part, been getting asking price for the properties. They just haven't sold enough of them yet. The bad news is the diocese is still awaiting a ruling on the appeal of bankruptcy court Judge Carl Bucke's decision limiting the amount of proceeds from the $4.2 million sales of Christ the King Seminary that could be used towards the abuse settlement trust. Bucke ruled that only a third of the proceeds could be applied for the settlement due to finding that most of the money construct the seminary in the late 1960s came from donors who intended it for these purposes. U.S. Judge Meredith Vaca heard oral arguments in December. If she backs Bucke's decision, the diocese may be limited to further in how much money other property sales can be used towards the settlement. Some Catholic affiliate entities, such as Catholic Charities and Foundation of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Buffalo, have also yet to turn over funds for settlement despite repeated requests from diocese officials. Bishop Michael Fisher said in a recent interview it was hard work convincing parishes and affiliate entities to hand over the money. Is there any other clarity from the Vatican over the use of parish fund proceeds from church sales toward the settlement? Not really. Some parishioners who have submitted Vatican appeals objecting that the parish use funds in the settlement have received a letter from dicastery for clergy saying their appeals were accepted for examination and suspending the parish contributions. The letters also stated that dicastery would be contacting Fisher about the issue. Fisher told the Buffalo News that dicastery was focusing on individual parishes and that his challenges was to help see what were experiences in the larger picture here in bankruptcy and how it would affect us. Fisher acknowledged some parishes may have yet had different data and financial numbers than the diocese used in reaching its conclusions and consolidations. Ultimately, we will have to come up with a settlement and bring some solace and restitution to the victims of the church, he said. Now let's look at the feature asking Eric. After brother's death, his wife wants to stay in touch. Dear Eric, my husband's brother was a nice guy, albeit boring and a conversation hog. But he was a family, and we invited him, along with his wife and son, to our home over the years. They lived 500 miles away. He passed away 3 years ago. His wife is one of the nastiest people I have ever met. She was verbally abusive to her husband, screaming and berating him in public. He was terrible to my in-laws, and they were very kind, sweet people. She was terrible to my in-laws. They were very kind, sweet people. She has even screamed at me in our home while visiting. Since he died, I have no desire to see her again. She will be traveling to a city 200 miles from us next summer. She wants to meet her there. I do not want to spend the time or money to meet her. My husband feels torn, guilty about ignoring his brother's wife. We still talk to her occasionally because we have called her. As an aside, we spent over $3,000 to fly our entire family out to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary several years ago. She totally ignored ours. I feel like I've been giving over the years, and I just want to say no. My husband is wavering. Thoughts? Done with her. You're done. That's a difference between saying no to an isolated request and ignoring a relative. Your husband might be at least partially assuaged by being direct. You don't necessarily need to get into all your grievances with her. You can simply say, we're not going to make the trip. Hope you have fun. Also worth asking yourself what a reasonable expectation of this relationship is. Your husband understandably may feel an obligation that's partially rooted in his grief over losing his brother. It could be worth it to keep up with this relationship even if your sister-in-law is unpleasant. You don't always want to go along. You don't always have to go along because you may have a different expectation. Dear, I also want to point out that your assessment of your late brother-in-law wasn't exactly glowing. You're entitled to your opinion, but it's healthy for you to acknowledge that you and your husband are coming from different places emotionally. You can keep your distance, but if he wants to go, let him. It may be simply what he needs to do. Dear Eric, I have met an interesting person at a friend's party, and a few weeks later invited her to a small lunch of 6 people at my house. The lunch included our mutual friend. I look forward to getting to know her and therefore seated her next to me. I should add that this is an entirely platonic. I'm a 70-year-old heterosexual woman, and she's in a happily heterosexual marriage. I tried to engage her in conversation, asking about her work and what I knew her interests, and she responded tepidly. When I came back from clearing the plates, bringing coffee and dessert, I found that she had left her place next to me and squeezed in next to our mutual friend at the other end of the table, dragging her chair to the new position, and was deeply engrossed in conversation with her. I was so taken aback I didn't say anything. I continued to engage only with her friend for the rest of the lunch, leaving me with no one sitting to my right. Felt hurt and shocked, and was I wrong? Is this normal behavior? What could I have said? Ruffled by guests. Dear guest, your feelings are valid and understandable. This person was a guest at your home, and her behavior comes off as ungracious. This may be the intention, though. It's impossible that she misread the cues and got too comfortable. Conversely, it's possible that she has social anxiety and retreated to a conversation with someone she knew better. Indeed, the small gathering, I presume, of people who were mostly strangers to her may have been more than she could handle. That's also understandable, but it would have been better for her to decline the invite with an explanation or in the moment say, I appreciate your hospitality. I'm very shy. I hope you do not take offense. Kudos to you for being forthcoming and creating the space to make a new friend. I'm sorry it didn't work out as planned. I'm not sure there's much you could have said in the moment or would have made things awkward in such a small group, needlessly put on guests in the spot. If you want to try again, though, it's best to address the unmet expectations in a non-adversarial way. I had, and I was disappointed that we didn't have much conversation. Are you interested as friends? You're listening to a reading of articles and features from today's Buffalo News. Time is 30 minutes after the hour. Now let's take a look at sports. The Olympics, creating memories. From dreams to Olympic teams, Buffalo stars share inspirations. Tage Thompson's first fascination with the Olympics didn't come with the flick of Sidney Crosby's wrist or from a mad dash to a snowy finish line. It came from Shaun White's signature move on a snowboard. The Buffalo Sabres center thinks back to watching the 2010 Winter Olympics in Vancouver. He immediately remembers watching White, the red-headed half-pipe daredevil, go airborne and execute the double Mick twist, 1260, a combination of 3.5 rotations and 2 flips in a matter of seconds. The thrill of flying captured Thompson, but it never got Thompson to soar in the air. I remember watching it and thought it was really cool, Thompson said. I snowboarded a little as a kid, but never the half pipe. Thompson instead has evolved into the NHL's bona fide goal scorer, and now has a chance to make his own Winter Olympic moment when the United States men's hockey team, which opens the tournament at 3:10 p.m. Thursday against Latvia in St. Galea Arena in Milan, Italy. Thompson is one of 2 Sabres who will play in the Winter Olympics in Milan Cortina di Appizo, joining defenseman Rasmus Dahlin, who will play for Sweden. Sabres general manager Jarmo Kekalainen is an assistant general manager for Finland, and Ben Compton, the Sabres team massage therapist and mobility specialist, will be on the United States support staff. Sabres goalie Jukka-Pekka Luukkonen was on Finland's first roster, but will not play in the Olympics after he sustained a lower body injury in a 7-4 win at Toronto January 27th. The Olympics brings together athletes from around the world once every 4 years, a collection of athletes from traditional winter sports powerhouses such as Norway and the United States, and countries not necessarily known for winter sports, including Jamaica, Trinidad, Tobago, and Caribbean countries that will field 4-man bobsled teams. But the Summer and Winter Olympics are events that spark the sense of patriotism among nations around the world, but also spark dreams, and in Thompson's case, some curiosity about something they never tried. Dahlin, the Sabres captain, explains the Olympic trumps even the NHL when it comes to national pride, though through sports in Sweden. Sweden doesn't have a Super Bowl. It doesn't have a Stanley Cup as North America does, unless there's a Swedish superstar playing deep into the postseason. The Swedish Hockey League, Dahlin explained, is a spectator sport. But as a nation tunes in when Sweden plays hockey in Winter Olympics, Dahlin grew up in Lidköping, Sweden. Not even 6 years old when he watched a team laden with NFL stars from his home country win its second Olympic gold medal in men's hockey. Dahlin can still recall watching footage of Peter Forsberg winning the gold medal for Sweden in a shootout against Canada in 1994 in Lillehammer, Norway. Forsberg played in the NHL from 1995 to 2011 and is in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Then Dahlin watched Sweden win the gold medal in 2006 in Turin, Italy, with Forsberg on the roster. The win fostered Dahlin's goal of playing in the Olympics. Dahlin played for Sweden in the 2018 Winter Olympics in South Korea. He became a veteran of international competition, having played for Team Sweden in the 2024 IIHF World Championships and 4 nations face-off in February. He makes a vow for this year's Olympics: savor everything about this trip, knowing how significant it is. I think I was too young and dumb to appreciate it, Dahlin said of playing in the 2018 Olympics in a humorous tone. I just went there thinking it was a normal hockey tournament. This time I'm going to really enjoy it. You could feel their passion. For the women, many of the recent generations Olympics are their first time seeing female athletes in competition. in 1976, Nadia Comaneci achieved the first perfect score in perfect 10 in gymnastics in the Summer Olympics in Montreal. In fact, she scored 7 tens and won 3 of her 5 career gold medals in Montreal. 1984, the U.S. Mary Lou Retton won a gold medal in the individual all-around gymnastics competition, and Joan Benoit won the women's marathon in Los Angeles. 4 years later, Florence Griffith Joyner and Jackie Joyner-Kersee combined to win 5 gold medals for USA in the track and field in Seoul in 1992. Christy Yamagachi won the gold medal in figure skating in Albertville, France. After the Olympics grew to include more in women's sports, it introduced Cami Granado. She led the 1998 U.S. women's hockey team to its first Olympic gold medal in the sport. Sidney Crosby, curling enthusiast, a central figure in one of the most notable moments in the Winter Olympics in the past 20 years, visited KeyBank Center on Thursday. Pittsburgh Penguins captain Sidney Crosby scored the golden goal in 2010 in Vancouver and lifted Canada the gold medal in the men's hockey in a 3-2 win over the United States. Crosby then Sabre goalie Ryan Miller at 7:40 of overtime off a pass from Jerome McGinley. Growing up in Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia, he and his family turned into the Winter Games, and like Thompson, the Sabre sniper, found his initial interest in the form of skiing. I remember watching skiing. I was thinking the moguls as a kid and just being glued to the TV, Crosby said. I know it's a lot about the other sport. I don't know a lot about the other sports. Obviously, I loved hockey, but I remember watching all the different sports. Curling was a big one, and you automatically fell in love with those sports during the Olympics. Thompson has a memory of the United States Olympic hockey moment, too. One that's up there in Olympic lore is Crosby's game-winning goal, T.J. Oshie's shootout winner for the United States in a 3-2 preliminary round against Russia in the 2014 games in Sochi. Watching as a kid, just dreaming you'd be in that situation in that moment at some point in your career, and now you've got the opportunity to be in a situation you go over and play and represent your country. Thompson said it's an awesome feeling. This will be the second Olympics for Darlene and Skamura, but the first for Thompson. Crosby's first Olympics in 2010, again, was incredibly memorable. And he has advice for first-time Olympians such as Thompson. It's a unique experience for a lot of different reasons. Crosby said, not only do you represent your country, but you being able to share the experience with all the athletes all over the world. I am sure a lot of guys dreamt of that experience, so you try to do the best you can. You need to be focused. You're there for a reason, to compete and try to win. You really need to try to take in that experience the best you can, too. Continuing along now in Olympic coverage, Eileen Gu skied backwards out of the slope-style starting gate, jumped into the first rail, and did a 270-degree spin and landed on the snow. Then she fell. For the next hour, she prepared for her second and final and now excruciating pressure-packed chance to keep all her Olympic goals alive. She kept telling herself, there's no time anymore like it is. Like this is it. One of the shining stars of the Winter Games started down the specter of being eliminated in the very first event Saturday, delivering a clutch performance and qualifying for a session that produced way more drama than expected. I went through the 5 stages of grief first, Gu said in reaction to her fall. That drama began 6 seconds in when Gu and 4 years ago became the first action sport athlete to win 3 Olympic gold medals at the Games. She landed a strange angle off the very first feature on the trickier than expected rails portion and then skittering into the snow. Her score, a laughable 1.26 on a 100-point scale at the bottom of the hill. Confusion. Her mother, Jan, asked if she felt sleepy for the 10:30 a.m. start or if her blood sugar was low. She loaded up her daughter with some dried fruit and sent her back up the mountain for one of the longest hours of her life, waiting for a second decisive run that would determine whether the quest for 3 and 3 at the Olympics would remain intact. Then suddenly, I sank deep into myself. It was deep in the pit of my stomach, and I found my flow state and told myself I've worked so ridiculously hard. It's not that I love skiing. I'm obsessed with it. I've lived and breathed this. Then suddenly a feeling of calm. Gu thought, if there's anyone bet on now, I bet on myself. I've told myself I love myself, I trust myself, I love this sport, and I am the best, the 22-year-old said. Though anything but routine, the second run certainly looked it. Her score of 75.3 put her in second place. That held up for 23 women seeking 12 spots on the final Monday's final. The only merit score was posted by Mathilde Grimaud of Switzerland, who nailed her first run and didn't have to worry. Grimaud's narrow victory in China 4 years ago was the only thing that stood between Gu and 3 gold medals instead of her 2 and a silver. I honestly, the stress level today was really low. Easy for her to say. What nearly ruined this day for the sport's biggest name and will probably make the difference in the final was a rail session that is provingly more difficult than the average World Cup course. The first rail, the one Gu fell on, is bigger than those skiers are used to. But on the second run, Gu nailed that trick and showed a skill set that not everyone in the sport has, spinning all 4 ways, left and right, going forward and backward. And on those features, her ability to pull off again and do it with even more rotations than she showed off Saturday could be the difference between gold and silver or nothing. That's for Monday. On this day, a bluebird day at Lavigno Snow Park, frosted with a heavy dose of drama, a huge sigh of relief. Gu said she watched video of the first run on her phone and didn't really recognize the skier there. In golf, Hisutsun shoots 63 for second round lead. Ro Hitsutsun turned a water ball into a birdie to electrify the juiced-up crowds at the Phoenix Open. Scott Scheffler did what he needed to make yet another cut by turning in the kind of round expected by the world's number 1 player. Sassoon chipped in for the birdie after driving his ball on the water on the par 4 17th hole and shot a bogey-free 8 under 63 on Friday to surge into the lead second round of the Phoenix Open. I was very lucky, Hisatsun said through an interpreter. Scheffler enjoyed his round a bit more than he did while opening at a 73 that put him in danger of missing the cut for the first time since the 2022 FedEx St. Jude Classic. After working his grip, Scheffler shot 2 under 33 on the front 9 to move close to the cut line and left no doubt with 4 birdies on the back to extend his streak to 66 cuts made, longest active in PGA Tour. His 3-foot birdie at 18 capped a bogey-free 65 and got him to 4 under, 7 shots back, and he didn't think the 7-shot difference is insurmountable. Scheffler won twice when trailing by more than shots, including the 2022 Phoenix Open when he made up a nine shots for his first PGA Tour victory. Felt a bit lost out there at times yesterday, so I felt a lot better today. A lot better. Felt more in control of my game, he said. You can obviously see that through the cleaner card today. 2-time Phoenix Open champion Brooks Koepka had a much tougher go of it, finishing 2 over to miss the cut for his second tournament since being reinstated by the PGA Tour. He followed an opening 75 with a 69. 2 Japanese players made the most noise on another warm day at the TPC Scottsdale Stadium course. The 2-time Phoenix Open champion Hideki Matsuyama had a run of 6 straight birdies to shoot 64 in the morning and take the lead at 10 under. He was surpassed by his countryman in the afternoon. Hisatsuni was 5 under and 2 birdies on the front 9, then electrified the crowd with his going 6 under in a 5-hole stretch, highlighted by his chip in at 17 to reach 11 under 131. Overnight, leader Chris Gauderup shot 71 to join Pearson Cody, 68 at 8 under. Hitsasuni tied for second at the Torrey Pines last week after missing the cut in the season-opening Sony Open. He had 4 top 10s as a PGA Tour rookie last year. The 23-year-old knocked off a closing flourish with birdies on 13 and 14, then dropped an 8-foot eagle putt on his par 5 15th. Hitsasuni set roars through the stadium par 3 16th by seeking a 7-foot birdie and smiled sheepishly at his chip on 17 after hitting his tee shot into the pond. Now he'll be paired with Matsuyama on Saturday in the 3rd round. It's some dreams on my pairing, Hitsasami said. Matsuyama opened with a bogey-free 68 and began his second round with 3 straight pars. Then he started hitting it close. Matsuyama birdied the par 5, 13th, despite hitting his drive left into the desert, and hit the approach on his approach to the 3 feet on the 498 par 4, 14th for another birdie. Then he added another 3-footer and revved up an already juiced-up crowd with his 29-foot birdie putt on 16. Matsuyama has had a 2 birdie putt and a reachable par 4, 17th, and capped 6 under 30 on the back 9 with his 4-foot birdie putt on the number 18. He hit it inside 10 feet for 2 more birdies on numbers 4 and 5, but bogeyed the par 4 ninth after pulling his tee shot into the thick left rough. It's a great course, Matsuyama said. To an interpreter, you have to play well here, strike the ball well to play. The crowd gets me geared up for that. Matsuyama will have comfortable pairing with his 3rd round with Hitsuami. That good change if Scheffler makes another run. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News on Niagara Radio Reading Service. The time is 45 minutes after the hour. Continuing along in sports, Jay Skursky's mailbag. Change is expected with new scheme. Sam R. asks, does it appear to you now that linebacker has become a top priority in the draft? Also, will a healthy Matt Milano be retained as experienced veteran who can share his experience with any of those new linebackers? Jim asks, Jim Leonard is expected to change the Bills scheme from 4-3 to 3-4. How would this change impact selections in the 2026 Bills draft? What other impacts could it have, such as potential trades, not re-signing players, or re-signing free agents? Jay, even before the Bills switched their base defense from 4-3 to 3-4, after hiring Jim Leonard as defensive coordinator, linebackers was a need. The change only made even more pronounced. Terrell Bernard is coming off a down season because of an injury. Shep Thompson and Matt Milano are scheduled to become unrestricted free agents next month. The possibility of a total overhaul in that room exists. As for Milano, he had a tough start to 2025 due to injury, but rounded into form as the season went on. It's hard to count on him to be able to stay healthy if Leonard determines he's a good fit for his system and his price tag is low. I wouldn't be against a reunion, but it would have to be on the Bills' terms. Leonard recently met with general manager Brandon Beane and the team's scouting staff to go over the traits he's looking for in players. That meeting will surely guide how the Bills approach reconstructing their roster. Generally speaking, when a new coach takes over and implements a different scheme, it can be expected that a good amount of roster turnover will follow. Bills aren't going to be any different, although singling out players in free agency and the draft who may be targeted because the scheme change is a bit premature. As it pertains to the draft, the scouting combine later this month will help solidify those rankings. Then we can provide a better look into who some of the potential targets are. Brenda Alisi asks, with the shocking firing of Sean McDermott, the Joe Brady hire, and the many new coaches, what are some of the common questions you're being asked from national media beat reporters and NFL personnel? Also, what is your impression of the new stadium and all the Super Bowl hoopla compared to other venues that have hosted the big game? I've been asked several times out there about the Bills' decision to fire McDermott. The reaction to those I've talked has been mixed. Some feel it was justified based on the Bills' repeated playoff failings, while others have bought into the careful what you wish for line of thinking. As for the stadium, I've not been there yet. It will actually be the last current NFL stadium for me to cover a game in. That's pretty cool. It's a personal milestone. As for San Francisco as a host city, it's spread out. The Patriots are staying in Santa Clara and the Seahawks are in San Jose, while the media center is Radio Row based in downtown San Francisco. This has made some early wake-up calls with the media. Shuttle leaving at 6 a.m. The media was spoiled last year by able to walk down in New Orleans. The weather this week, however, has been glorious, sunny every day with temperatures approaching 70 degrees. If you're reading this in Buffalo, I'm sorry for bragging. That wasn't very nice of me. Joe in South Carolina asked, based on the exit reviews of Sean McDermott's dismissal, it's obvious that many fans held him in high esteem, right or wrong. It remains to be seen if it will benefit the Bills organization long term. Has anyone in the local media reached out to McDermott and gotten his take on what went wrong? I would like to hear what he has to say or he thinks in future holds for him. I texted with McDermott on the day of his dismissal. He politely declined to speak on record, although he did issue a classy statement later in the day. Beyond that, McDermott has opted to keep his thoughts private, which doesn't entirely surprise me. There is little to gain for him speaking about the situation publicly, especially if he plans having to return to coaching, from which I expect. From what I know of McDermott, I wouldn't expect him to be saying anything negative of his experience in Buffalo, even if he's frustrated about how things ended. It's not his nature. Doty in Lake Placid asked, please tell me if I'm being overly cynical with my commentary. As my astute football fan knows, the Super Bowl will be played without penalties, regardless of how blatant the offensive holding or pass interference is. The officials at the direction of the league administrators will not throw flags. The rationale is probably a concern that many penalties will ruin continuity and the speed of the game. There is no evidence to suggest the NFL tries to limit the number of penalties called in the Super Bowl. Last year, the Chiefs were flagged 7 times and the Eagles were penalized 8 times. That's in line with the normal game. 2023 Super Bowl, 49ers and Chiefs were each flagged 6 times. In 2022, the Chiefs were flagged 3 times, the Eagles were 6 times, including a massive defensive holding penalty with 1:48 remaining, allowed Kansas City to run the clock down before kicking the go-ahead field goal. That had a huge impact on the outcome of the game, and officials didn't swallow their whistles in the moment. So, Doty, you're being overly cynical with your commentary. Continuing along on Super Bowl Sunday, hate the Patriots? You are not alone. Let's count the reasons to root against New England. Super Bowl 60, Levi's Stadium, San Francisco. Sports can be a great unifier. There's nothing quite like coming together for a common cause, uniting family, friends, and strangers alike to root for a team, or in the case of Super Bowl 60, against one. Surely that's what all Western New York will do when New England meets the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday at Levi's Stadium. A collective sense of not again was felt when from the minute the Patriots advanced to the big game with a 10-7 victory over the Broncos in the AFC Championship game, and for good reasons. For many reasons, actually. In fact, let me count them. Number one, they've been in before many times. This is New England's 11th Super Bowl appearance, all of which has come in the last 40 years. They're seeking their 7th championship. Some for the rest of us, will ya? Save some for the rest of us, will ya? I've heard that talk. It's a great organization. An organization has a lot of good history, right? Patriots tackle Morgan Moses said, yeah, sure. Patriots fatigue is a real thing, especially in Buffalo. I've been on this team last year with 4 wins, New England tight end Austin Hooper said. There certainly wasn't Patriots fatigue last year. New England Patriots versus Seattle Seahawks. Game details. 6:30 p.m., Levi's Stadium, Santa Clara, California. Weather, 59 degrees, mostly cloudy, winds northwest at 7 miles an hour. WGRZ will host the festivities. Mike Tirico, Chris Collinsworth, Melissa Stark, Kaylee Harding. Radio, Bills Radio Network, WGR 55 in Buffalo. Chris Brown, Eric Wood, and Sal Capaccio, WGR. Series history, Seahawks lead 11-9. Line, Seahawks by 5, according to Front Page Bets. Did you know the Seahawks have won their last 3 meetings against the Patriots? New England's last win over Seattle came in Super Bowl in the Super Bowl in 2015. The locker room, those aren't conversations we've had or what we feel. None of us were part of that dynasty stuff. We're just a group of guys who came from other teams, drafted here, whatever, free agent acquisitions. We've come together, common goal. Hooper brings up another point. The Patriots turned things around too quickly. They went from 4 wins in 2024 to unseating the Bills as AFC East Championship on their way to a 14-3 record in the regular season. Number 2, they don't deserve to be here, despite all the gaudy mark. The main complaint is the Patriots didn't have to play anybody too tough. Numbers back that up. The Patriots played the easiest schedule of any team since the 1999 Rams squad. That's any team, period, not just one to reach the Super Bowl. Here's a wild stat, courtesy of CBS Sports. The Patriots played 11 games against teams who eventually fired their head coach. You have to go back 100 years. Yes, 100 to 1925. Frankfurt Yellow Jackets to say the same thing of another team. A lot of people talk about the schedule and who we've played or who we haven't played. None of that matters, Moses said. At the end of the day, football is the world's best sport. Patriots ended the Bills' 5-year run, the AFC East champs. That gave them the number 2 seed in the AFC playoffs. A favorable matchup against the Los Angeles Chargers, who were without both starting tackles and couldn't protect quarterback Justin Herbert, all because of it at home in the first round. In divisional rounds, the Houston Texans quarterback C.J. Stroud played perhaps his worst game of his life at the exact wrong time, turning the ball over 5 times. And Nico Collins was out because of injury. Finally, the AFC Championship game in Denver in the second half blizzard against the Bronco team missing its starting quarterback. Bo Nix suffered a broken ankle against the Bills in the divisional round, meaning Jarrett Stidham became the 7th quarterback since 1950 to make his first start of the season in the playoffs. And way to put it, that happens in about 1% of the time. So while betting 3 teams that entered the playoffs with 11-plus wins sounds impressive, it's not much when you consider those factors. Number 3, they took unnecessary shots at the Bills before departing for California. The Patriots have a send-off. During it, the MC delivered a message to Bills fans. It's been years since we did this. It feels like yesterday. The announcer gloated last week. Do you know who is not having a Super Bowl send-off today, Bills Mafia? All the tables are safe in Buffalo. Some weird energy. New England has won 16 of the past 17 games and only lost over that time coming to Buffalo in December. Buffalo erased a 21-point halftime deficit to win that game. Poking at the only team to beat you since October is a bit odd. That's a lot of hate coming, but we love it, man, said Patriots cornerback Alec Austin, who was a 7th-round pick of the Bills in 2023 but never appeared in the game for them. We just use it as fuel. Mission accomplished in that regard. Number 4, Tom Brady. The one barely needs an explanation. We'll explain anyway. You take a normal Brady once. Brady has made his waves this week when he said he didn't have a dog in the fight. Number 5, side with Josh Allen. And like Brady, the Bills quarterback was too chicken to pick a side. Allen will be pulling for the Seahawks. Was not too chicken to pick a side. He'll be pulling for the Seahawks, not just because the Patriots are in the AFC East. He's close friends with Seattle quarterback Sam Darnold, who was also a member of the 2018 draft class. Darnold didn't have an easy path to the Super Bowl. Seattle is his 5th team. And though through his journey he never complained, he's just continued to work hard. Allen said of his appearance this week on FS1's First Things First show. Now let's take a quick look at the scoreboard. The NFL, of course, has a Super Bowl today. New England at Seattle at 6:30 p.m. at Santa Clara. The NBA scores from last night. Actually, from Friday, Detroit beat New York, 118. New York's 80. Boston, 98. Miami, 96. Milwaukee, 105. Indiana, 99. New Orleans 119, Minnesota 115, Portland 135, Memphis 115, LA Clippers 114, Sacramento 111. Let's look at the let's take a look and see what else we got here. We're looking at that was the NBA. Let's look at college basketball. Number 22, St. John's 81. Over number 3, UConn 72, Yale 81, Brown 69. That was in the East. In the South, Davidson 84, Loyola Chicago 64, VCU 99, Dayton 73. In the Midwest, Belmont 68, UIC 62, Illinois State 86, Drake 76, Murray State 91, Southern Illinois 81, Northern Iowa 61, Bradley 49, Valparaiso 70, Evansville 63 in overtime. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for February 8th. We read the Buffalo News on the weekday and on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m., rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your reader today has been Ron Bickelman. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of Buffalo Magazine. Following that at noon. is the Sunday Gusto. And at 1 o'clock is the Sunday front section of the New York Times. Stay with us for these readings and more. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,